Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Race Amity Talks. My name is Supraja, I'm the president of Race Amity Club, and today we are going to talk about diversity in children's media. So first, I kind of wanted to address you guys and ask about a quote, start off. So the quote is, "To create diversity, you have to be diverse." So we talked about this in one of our previous discussions. So does anyone want to kind of sum up kind of what the quote entails and what it kind of means?
Something that comes to mind for me when I think of that quote is just the idea of not only obviously we all come with our own traits and everything, and we can't really change who we are, but if we can expand our minds to think about other people's shoes and where other people are coming from, I think that goes into empathy and that type of thing. So that's kind of just what comes to mind for me.
That's awesome. Anyone else?
I think what we talked about before was also that if you have a show and you're trying to portray diversity, you want to use the voices of the people that are coming from that background instead of just trying to use stereotypes to show that diversity. You want to actually empower the voices behind it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Trudy. And I think that's a really good segue into what we want to talk about mainly today. Our personal experiences in TV shows that we watch. I know a lot of us here are from different backgrounds. So how did you guys feel, especially when you were watching TV shows as a kid or reading books? Did you feel like you could relate to the characters? Were they diverse enough? Feel free to just let it out.
I know for me, I'll just say the movies or the TV shows. I couldn't think of any TV shows because the TV shows I watched when I was younger were not good examples. But my first one was Mulan, which was the first digital media I watched when I was younger where I actually felt represented. And then one that didn't show diversity or was had gross stereotypes was Dumbo. It's another movie, which is in Dumbo there was a flock of crows, and they embodied a very stereotypical representation of African Americans. And the head crow, the name of the head crow was Jim Crow, which was disgusting. And for me, it was kind of scary because the first time I watched Dumbo was when I was probably 6 or 7, and so to be exposed to those stereotypes so young. Obviously at that age I didn't see anything wrong with it, but as I grew older I realized how disgusting it was to be exposed to such stereotypes at such a young age.
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up, Evelyn. I think that also kind of ties into why it's so important to include diversity at such a young age, right? Anyone else want to share?
I used to watch this show. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there's a show called Jessie on Disney, and that actually had an Indian character in it, and they definitely had diversity in that show. I mean, they had a diverse cast, but not a diverse storyline. They used that character sort of as comic relief, but in doing that, they kind of made fun of a lot of, I guess, they kind of used a lot of Indian stereotypes to produce that comedy. Which was wrong because it's kind of portraying Indians as something that they not necessarily are. So they'd kind of show him in the light of being a very awkward, nerdy, unathletic kid. And as a kid watching that, when you watch something like that, you usually believe what you see. And so seeing that kind of makes you think that, oh, you have to fit into that, those characteristics. Otherwise you might not truly be Indian, or you kind of follow what you see. Just like when you're younger, you follow pretty easily what your parents tell you. So it's important that shows make sure to fully show and really. And I know that the in the production, the people who were producing that Jessie, there was no one who was actually Indian. So they were kind of just throwing around words like Indian gods and religious words without even knowing the meaning of them. So it was kind of just disrespectful to Indians and their culture.
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up, Anika. I think just hearing from what you said, I can also think of in Phineas and Ferb. There was a similar character, and I see Shruti nodding too. And he was also like, Baljeet was there for like comic relief, right? You know, like Beeford always gave him wedgies. Like he was always kind of the side character. And like when there was one episode about India, I guess it was very misrepresented. And I think, yeah, Anika really summed it up really well. Anyone else?
I mean, growing up, I, like, until now also, I never really considered myself having moved to America. I mean, like, I came here from Saudi Arabia. We came here from my parents to like study here. So I always saw everything as foreign, and I saw myself as a foreigner, and I still kind of see myself as a foreigner. So when I see like attempted representations of, I guess, like Arabs or Muslims, I expect them to not be like right or like accurate. So growing up, I never really noticed a lot of the diversity, I guess. Like I never considered it, or like I never saw it as an option, I guess. It was more of I'm here, I'm not supposed to be here. And I guess these shows are just, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like here, but I'm not supposed to be here. So.
Yeah, that's actually a really amazing point. It's almost like we're kind of habituated into thinking that, oh, it's okay if like our culture isn't represented. You know, it's normal. And yeah, Yusuf, that's a really, really good point. I think as like a kid too, like you want to be like, you move to America, so you have to be American. You kind of have to suppress your own culture and identity, you know, to adapt this new one. And that necessarily shouldn't be the case, which we learn later on. Maybe not, maybe like too late. Anyone else?
Sorry. I think I just wanted to point out, like, I feel like that's the mindset of, like, a lot of immigrants who come here. Like, I've noticed from my own experience, like, talking to my own parents, talking to my friends' parents who are minorities, a lot of immigrants have this mindset, like, we aren't supposed to be in America in the first place. So even if they see misrepresentations in media, or they're stereotyped, or they're blatantly discriminated against, they kind of just take it in stride and are like, well, that's how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to like become acclimated to the American culture. I'm supposed to I forget the word, assimilate. I'm supposed to be the one to assimilate. They don't have to accept me. I have to match to their culture, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, Evelyn, I understand what you're saying by that. Also, like when Yostra said, like, you kind of expect to not see your culture portrayed, it's like, it's because when you're younger, like, I feel like when you're younger, you don't realize, so like you kind of do expect it. Like I expected it when I was like maybe like 4 or 5, and then I started seeing that like it would never appear, like an Indian character would never appear, and then I was like, okay, like the next show would come out and I'd just be like, yeah, like I just don't expect it anymore. And like I know what like you guys mean by like Baljeet and like Robbie, like definitely they were portrayed as like the nerdy, like someone like even like wimpy, like someone who like could get made fun of, and just like they always had that accent, which I found kind of disrespectful, because like not everyone that is Indian has an accent. And like even if they do have an accent, like I feel like they kind of made it so like high pitched and like a way to like mock the accent, which I like definitely it was like a bad influence when you're younger, because you see that and you're like, why are people making fun of like my culture?
Yeah, no, for sure, Shruti, for sure. I guess we did talk about a lot of examples that didn't have diversity, but do you guys ever see any shows, any books that you felt like really did a good job of integrating other cultures?
Whenever like people discuss like diversity in children's media, the first like thing that comes to my head is like Arthur, because it's like one of the few shows like I've seen and like watched as a kid that had a diverse like cast, despite like most of the characters being like anthropomorphic like animals. They still managed to like not just like racial diversity, but they also had like religious diversity. I remember one of the main characters was Jewish, and like during their holiday special they discussed like Jewish holidays, and then they also had like a side character who was Muslim, and he was like a pen pal, and he would show up from time to time. And it also had like economic diversity and like family situations and stuff like that. So I feel like that is like the best, sadly one of the few, but like one of the best like examples of like representation in like children's media.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Omema. I think as a kid, I really watched Arthur a lot too. And I mean, like sometimes like it pops on the TV and like I see that every episode, I mean, it always has like a moral or message, right? But I feel like the way they get to that with like, again, Francine she's the one who's Jewish. But like some of them, like they live in an apartment, like Muffy is on this like really rich side, but all of them are still friends. And I feel like those differences don't divide them. They really show that in the show. And I think that it was really good. It still is really good. Anyone else?
Through reading the articles that you sent us, I've noticed that a lot of people said that not only just shows that like show diversity, but something that's been coming up, I think, a lot more recently lately is like actual conversations of talking about anti-racism and how to be anti-racist through like Nickelodeon seem to have a lot, Sesame Street. So I think that's something that's like really important for kids now, not only to just see it, but to also hear it and kind of understand it.
Yeah, for sure, Alana. That's a really good point. I think discussion is like what we're doing here, right? We're discussing. I think discussion is really important to hear others' opinions, not just tell, but also receive.
I have a quote that kind of connects to what we just talked about. It's like these characters are polycultural. They don't just accept their differences, they don't even recognize them. And that was in one of the articles. And I actually like disagree with this because I think you have to recognize people's cultures and differences in order to accept them. And it shouldn't be that you're ignoring them to accept the person. And that kind of goes back to like, oh, Mama, what you said about Arthur. I like that, like, they show not just cultural diversity, they also show like situational diversity, like in people's lives, their backgrounds, like economically, socially, familially. And then like what Ilana said, that like you have to actively try. And I feel like that comes back to like you have to recognize the differences.
Yeah, for sure. It's really good point you brought up, Shruti. I actually wanted to mention another show. I think PBS Kids in general as a channel has done a really, really good job just kind of tailoring to these needs of inclusion and diversity. Like Martha Speaks, for example, the main character, Martha's family, like their mother is Hispanic and the father is Caucasian. And they celebrate like both holidays. They're bilingual. And I think it's really good to show that, and like in families too, like Shruti said, familial diversity, showing that it's okay, like not everyone has to be Caucasian, not everyone has to be Hispanic. Like it's okay to have like different backgrounds that you come from. But yeah, I think that's like also another good segue into the last thing I want to talk about today. Why is it so important that we start at such a young age? You know, what kind of impact would it have?
As I said before, like when we're growing up, when you're told something by your parents, or like when you're told like, oh, this is how you're supposed to do something, you kind of blindly give into doing it until you're a little older. And once you are older, you're kind of just, you've been doing it for so long that it's just like a habitual thing. But just also seeing things and hearing about them makes you, like hearing about them a lot makes you believe that they're true. Even if they might not be, and you might not ever take the time to like question it. And so that's why you believe the stereotypes and that like lack of diversity. After seeing it, you believe that that's how it's supposed to be, which is wrong. So it's important to start when you're young.
And that was a really good summary, Nika. Anyone else want to add to that?
I also think it doesn't just go back to like what you may personally feel. It goes back to people who don't know about other cultures. Like if you're not coming from a POC background and you see different cultures portrayed in these stereotypes, you're going to start making assumptions about that culture. And then when you go into school and you see people from that background, you might use those assumptions when you think about those people, which is horrible because like those shows are portrayed as characters, but that reflects real people in real life. And especially when you're a kid, it's like not your fault. You see things like Anika said and you believe them. So when you go into school, you don't recognize like what your wrongs are. Like people have made fun of like Indian accents, right? But like, can you blame them? That's what they see in the media as young children. Like they've never been really explained that like it's it's like disrespectful to make fun of them, because even like big shows they've seen make fun of them. So I think it goes back to like just making it aware in the whole community what a media portrays culture versus what it could actually be like.
Yeah, that was awesome, Trudy.
I
go
actually found a quote that was pretty similar with that was in one of the websites, and it said, "Young children are constantly being bombarded with negative and patronizing images of Africa, and generally by the time they are 10, they have already formed a negative impression about the continent as a whole." So I think that that's really interesting, and how I saw on another website as well about how important it is for a parent to like sit with their kid and kind of just pause the show or pause the movie and just explain like there is positives and there is like obviously like each country has like their problems, like everywhere has like these stereotypes, but to be able to recognize the positives and for a parent to be able to show that to their child, I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Like I feel like when we're younger, we're just taught like Africa doesn't have water. I feel like that's like, and then we're never explained like what we can do to help, or like what, like why. Like we just put that economic like bias in there, and then we just like don't address it.
Exactly. Yeah. Maya, you were gonna say something?
Sorry.
No, totally all right. So I do think it's really important for any young child to really have that positive reinforcement, because media can be it's very influential. It's really like, in some ways, it's really a vessel for teaching about certain cultures. And if it's misrepresented, maybe some young girl will look at the TV and say, oh, is this what people think of me? And they'll really have that it can even create a really negative self-image in pertaining to their culture specifically. So it's really important to have that accurate representation.
Yeah, for sure. Evelyn?
I was just gonna like mention like what Trudy was talking about. I literally, the only thing that we ever learned about like in terms of like African culture or the continent, like the only thing I remember learning was like reading this book called A Long Walk to Water. It was like that was literally the only piece of African culture we were ever exposed to, like in my whole like 16 years in the 17 years in the public education system. Like I feel like that's like so wrong. Like there's always problems in public education where we like literally we're so focused on American history, we never get exposed to other cultures. I think it's for us like it's a little better because we have a class, and like this is just specifically talking about the North Andover High School, but we have a class like freshman year called World Civ. But like I don't even think that's enough. Like I barely know anything about African culture, and I feel like that needs to change if we want to also understand like institutionalized racism in America and how that like relates.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good point, Evelyn. Just kind of adding on to that. We also read An Ordinary Man, the Rwandan genocide, right? So when we think back, like that's just another book that we've read. Lion for India, I remember like freshman year, that was definitely, it wasn't, all of us are kind of cringing right now, but I think it definitely gave one singular lens into the culture, and I feel like if there was more exposure, and like not even like books. I mean, like I know like as students, we don't want to read hundreds and hundreds of books, but like little articles. I know pictures that are very, very good ways to kind of learn about a culture. So yeah, I think thank you everyone for coming. Those were all really, really good points. And if no one has anything else to say, I want to thank you all for coming. This was a great, productive discussion. And we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.